All right, let's jump right in. We are about to unpack a story that kicks off with a man being burned at the stake 700 years ago, and it ends, well, it pretty much ends right now, with the year 2026. This isn't just a history lesson, it's more like a countdown.
So here it is. This is the prediction that sets the stage for everything we're about to explore. It's from a document the Knights Templar supposedly unearthed from beneath Solomon's Temple, a text that was said to foretell the final crisis of civilization. And you have to admit, its description of our modern world is, well, it's pretty chillingly on the nose.
Okay, this is where it gets really wild. The prophecy seems to map onto Western history with spooky precision. Each seal lines up with a massive, order-shattering event. You've got the papacy moving to Avignon. Check. Martin Luther and the Reformation. Check. The French Revolution. Check. World War I. The atomic bomb. Boom, boom, precise hits one after another. And that leads us to the seventh and final seal, the one it says is happening right now, the collapse of our very ability to agree on what's real.
So if truth is becoming invisible, as the prophecy claims, we should be able to see the signs, right? And the first most obvious place to look is in the giant chasm between what our leaders say is happening and what the underlying reality actually is. Let's start with Europe.
For years, the official story, the big political goal in Europe has been all about strategic autonomy. You hear it all the time. It's this idea of becoming a truly independent global power. But behind the scenes, the reality is something analysts are calling the triangle of dependence. Turns out, Europe is deeply structurally reliant on the United States for its military hardware, for its access to space, and now for its energy supply. The story and the system, they're literally moving in opposite directions.
And if you want to see this whole thing in a single number, here it is, 611. That's how many American F-35 fighter jets European nations have bought or have on order. Now, this isn't just about buying airplanes. It's about buying into an entire ecosystem. The whole fleet runs on cloud software that's based in the US, which effectively gives the Pentagon a remote, well, a kill switch.
I mean, you can't really say it any more bluntly than that. This single line from an internal report just nails it. And this dependency goes way beyond jets. It's in orbital infrastructure, where SpaceX is now the main player, and it's in energy, where almost all of Germany's new LNG imports are coming from the US. The official narrative is independence. The physical infrastructure screams the exact opposite.
And look, this isn't just a European thing. Remember that 2019 phone call between President Trump and President Zelensky? The official story, the one put out to the public, was that it was just a routine diplomatic conversation. But the reality of what was said was so politically explosive that the transcript was taken off its normal secure server and hidden on a top-secret system, one that's usually reserved for covert ops. The truth was literally locked away behind a wall of secrecy.
So this collapse of the official story isn't just happening in geopolitics. It's actually happening at a much, much deeper level. It's happening to our most fundamental stories, the ones we tell ourselves about who we are and where we come from. The very myths of our origins might be just as fragile.
Let's just take the Czech Republic as an example. The national myth, the story that's been taught for over a century, is of a purely Slavic people. It's a cornerstone of their identity. But the genetic data, well, it tells a completely different story. It turns out that a whopping 2/3 of the paternal DNA in the Czech population is not Slavic at all. It's a mix of Western Celtic and older Germanic lines, a hidden majority living under a Slavic cultural story.
And this brings us to the core metaphor for this whole investigation, the palimpsest. You know, an ancient manuscript where the monks would scrape the original writing off to reuse the expensive parchment. They'd write something new over the top, but if you look really, really closely, you can still see the faint traces of the original text underneath. History isn't a blank page. It's been written over, again and again.
And sometimes that hidden layer, that erased text, it breaks right through to the surface. Take the Hussite Wars in the 15th century. On the surface, it was a religious conflict, but some analysts argue it was also a kind of tactical atavism, a reemergence of a repressed warrior culture, a ferocity that had way more in common with ancient Germanic warbands than the official myth of the peaceful Slavic farmer. The ghost in the machine came out.
And we see this pattern of an overwritten identity in other places too. Deep in the Carpathian Mountains, there's a group of people called the Boyki. Now, that name almost certainly connects them to the ancient Celtic Boy tribe, but for centuries, they've refused to call themselves that because the name was turned into an insult by their neighbors. Their own identity was erased, overwritten by what other people said about them.
So how in the world do you read this overwritten history? How do you get past the official stories, the myths, the insults? Well, you turn to the hard science. You turn to the one witness that, unlike a medieval chronicler, can't be bribed, can't be intimidated, and simply cannot lie. Our own DNA.
And this is that unbribable witness in action. You're looking at a Y-DNA sequence, a genetic pathway. It shows the direct lineage of key Celtic markers, like R1b-P312. And here's the thing. These are the exact same markers found, not just in Ireland and Scotland, but deep inside that supposedly Slavic population in Central Europe. The genetics provide the hard, scientific proof that the old story, the palimpsest, is real.
Okay, so let's connect the dots here. We have official stories collapsing in global politics. We have foundational myths about our own identities being overwritten and exposed. Now let's bring these threads together and see how they slam right into that original Templar prophecy for the year 2026.
Yeah, let's go back to that final seal for a second. The prophecy said the final crisis wouldn't be a war or a plague, it would be an information crisis, and it would be kicked off by something it called a mind from nothing. Now, 700 years ago, that must have sounded like absolute raving madness. Today, with the explosion of generative AI and deep fakes, it sounds less like a prophecy and more like a technical manual for our current reality.
So the sources we're looking at argue that 2026 isn't about one single bad event. It's about a total systemic failure. It's a perfect storm where four massive crises all hit their breaking point at the exact same time. You've got the technological crisis with AI, the mind from nothing. You have a geopolitical crisis as the old world order completely unravels. You have an economic crisis with global debt at insane levels, and all of it is wrapped in the epistemological crisis, the death of truth itself.
But here's the final twist. The story goes that the Templars didn't just leave a warning. The sources claim they also left behind an instruction manual, a kind of guide for how to think and operate in a world where you can no longer trust what you see or what you hear.
And that manual is alchemy. Now, hold on, not the stuff about turning lead into gold. We're talking about alchemy as a psychological process, a four-step path to clarity. Step 1 is negredo, the blackening. You have to accept that the worldview you were given is probably a lie. Step 2 is albedo, the whitening. You detach emotionally and just observe the system as it is. Step 3 is citronitis, the yellowing. You start to see the hidden patterns behind all the noise. And finally, step 4 is rubedo, the reddening. You stop outsourcing your trust to external authorities, and you become your own verification system.
And that brings this entire 700-year-old investigation right back to you. The Templar prophecy, if it's real, isn't just about geopolitics or ancient DNA. It's a direct personal challenge. Because in an age of infinite lies where truth itself seems to be invisible, the only question that really matters is this one. How are you going to figure out what's real?